Hello, and welcome to this lecture on economic growth and unemployment. Remember, the Federal Reserve uses monetary policy to achieve stable prices and maximum employment. But what exactly do we mean by maximum employment? In this class, we will examine unemployment. We will introduce some new definitions of unemployment: the natural rate of unemployment, full employment, maximum employment. We will understand what this terminology means and why it is needed. We will also define gross domestic product, or GDP. This is a measure of total output for an economy. We will see the relationship between the unemployment rate and GDP growth in the data. Finally, we will understand why the Federal Reserve does not try to reduce the unemployment rate to zero. Let's start with the unemployment data. An individual is unemployed if they do not have a job and they are seeking employment. The unemployment rate is the share of the labor force that is currently unemployed. In the graph, you can see the US unemployment rate in the modern era. The shaded areas in the graph indicate recessions. You can see that unemployment increases rapidly during a recession. For instance, from October 1973 to May 1975, the unemployment rate nearly doubled. It increased from 4.6% to 9%. At the same time, unemployment falls rapidly after the end of a recession. By March 1976, the unemployment rate had already dropped to 7.6%. Now, let's turn to our measure of economic growth, gross domestic product. GDP is the total dollar value of all goods and services produced by an economy. Real GDP adjusts this measure for inflation. Real GDP in the US has been growing over time. However, during recession, it falls. This means the economy contracts. Let's take a look at this in the data. The graph shows quarterly percent changes of growth in real GDP. During recessions, the shaded areas, real GDP growth is negative. You can see that GDP fell by as much as 1% during each quarter of 1974. What is the relationship between unemployment and real GDP growth? During recession, unemployment goes up and GDP goes down. During expansion, the opposite happens. This suggests a negative correlation. Let's combine the previous two charts to see how this works. Each dot represents a quarter. On the x-axis, we have the growth in unemployment relative to the prior quarter. And on the y-axis, we have the GDP growth for that same quarter. We can see the negative correlation in the data. This correlation is indicated by the downward sloping red line. Based on historical US data, the slope of the line is about -2. This empirical fact was first stated by the economist Arthur Orkin. It is known as Orkin's law. Why do monetary policymakers find Orkin's law useful? Because Orkin's law gives some guidance about how much unemployment will decline when they cut the interest rate to stimulate the economy. Once you have an estimate for how much real GDP is going to increase after an interest rate cut, then you also know by how much unemployment is going to decline. Understanding the relationship between these macroeconomic variables enables the Fed to better target monetary policy. Let's now ask a different question. You might be thinking, why can't central banks reduce the unemployment rate to 0? The answer is that there is a natural rate of unemployment. This means that even if the economy is at peak performance, some workers will still be unemployed. One reason for this natural rate of unemployment is that it takes time to find a suitable job, a job that is a good fit with your schedules or skill sets. This is true for individuals that recently left education, recently lost a job, or those relocating. Other factors creating positive unemployment include new technologies that make old skills obsolete and force reallocation. Just consider what autonomous driving will mean for truck drivers. Higher unemployment benefits may also give unemployed more time to find a better fitting job. Let's look again at the time series of the unemployment rate in the US. Roughly speaking, we can estimate the natural rate based on unemployment during good economic times. Estimates suggest that in the 1950s and 1960s, the natural rate of unemployment was 4%. For the period between 1970 and 1983, the natural rate was estimated to be 6%. And from 1984 to 2000, the estimate went down to 5.5%. The chart also shows large cyclical fluctuation in unemployment. Notably, during recessions, unemployment exceeds the natural rate. This is where monetary policy can be effective. One last question. What is the natural rate of unemployment today? Let's look at unemployment in the new millennium. After the 2001 recession, the unemployment rate recovered only slowly as compared with the recessions in the second half of the 20th century. Similarly, after the 2008 financial crisis, the unemployment rate did not recover as quickly as expected. This prompted speculation that the natural rate of unemployment had increased. However, by December 2019, close to the end of the longest economic expansion in the US, the unemployment rate was 3.6%. Likewise, after the COVID pandemic, the unemployment rate was historically low. This suggests that the natural rate of unemployment may have decreased. Overall, it is hard to say. New technologies or changes in the labor market might play a role. However, we need more time before we can make a determination. Let's wrap up. We covered two concepts in this session. First, we saw that changes in unemployment and real GDP are negatively correlated in the data. This is called Orcon's law. This relationship guides monetary policy decisions. Second, even when the economy is growing at full capacity, unemployment will be greater than 0. This is called the natural rate of unemployment.